Hi, I'm Barry Ostrowski. At RWJ Barnabas Health, we believe that everyone needs to be informed about the important healthcare issues affecting their lives. That's why we're proud to support the important educational programming produced by the Caucus Educational Corporation.
State of Affairs with Steve Adubato is brought to you from the Agnes Veris NJTV studio at 2 Gateway. Funding has been provided by RWJ Barnabas Health, the New Jersey Education Association, New Jersey Resources, the law firm of Gibbons PC, Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, NJM, International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 825, and by the Northeast Regional Council of Carpenters. Promotional support provided by NJ Advance Media and by NJ Biz, all business, all New Jersey.
To the premiere edition of State of Affairs. I'm Steve Adubato, coming to you from the Agnes Veris NJTV studio in Newark, New Jersey. It is our honor to welcome Ambassador Phil Murphy, Democratic candidate for governor of the great state of New Jersey. Welcome to State of Affairs.
I'm honored to be here, Steve. Thanks for having me.
It is great to have you. Let me ask you, Ambassador, why would you choose to run for governor in the state of New Jersey? We have just a few challenges that we are dealing with.
We sure do. I could give you a couple of answers. One is I grew up in a culture of service in my family. My dad didn't get out of high school, but boy, we were into politics and he made sure we were. But more immediately, in the here and now, I think New Jersey is one of the most undermanaged entities I've ever seen in any walk of my life. There's so much we could be doing. Do we have crises? Do we have challenges? Absolutely. But with the right leadership and the right priorities, I think we can get back on our feet faster than any of us may think.
Let's do this. By the way, we're going to be interviewing virtually every major candidate on the Democratic and the Republican side. And once the candidates are chosen in June on the Democratic and Republican side, we'll focus on those two candidates. And by the way, finally, I want to thank our partners here at NJTV, where we're coming to you from, for making all of this possible. Ambassador, let me ask you this. The pension issue. We're doing this program right after the governor has delivered his State of the Budget address. I mean, he has talked about one of the largest pension contributions, I believe, $2.5 billion in the FY18 budget.
Yeah.
That is one of the largest pension contributions a governor has contributed in terms of this crisis, in terms of the New Jersey public employees retiring.
Yep.
That's a good thing, correct?
It's a step in the right direction, but it's way late and it's not enough. This is a crisis that's been building since the 1990s. And time again, we've had folks on one side of the table, the public sector unions, do what they've been asked to do, and the state has consistently reneged, not only under Governor Christie, but before as well. So it's
Democrats as well.
Both sides of the aisle. No one has kicked the can as far or as hard as this governor. It's a step in the right direction to make this payment, but it's not enough.
But let me ask you, Ambassador, in terms of total contribution.
Yeah.
And again, this is a cumulative situation, and it's hard to figure out. And you know numbers better than most. You have a background in finance, if you will. What would you say the actual, I don't know whether to call it debt or the amount of money that actually is going to come due? Is it 40? Is it 50? Is it 60? Is it $80 billion in terms of public employees who will retire in New Jersey and the money's not going to be there?
Yeah, I'd look to the actuaries. I think it's $40-something billion. And as you mentioned, if you don't make the payments, it's a cumulative crisis. It gets out ahead of you. It's also one of the thorniest crises we'll ever face because in the aggregate, it's measured in tens of billions of dollars. I defy you to find someone who was changing bedpans for 25 or 30 years and look at that individual and ask whether she or he is living high off the hog, as they say. These folks are barely above the poverty line. So that dichotomy, that paradox, makes this as difficult as it is.
But, Ambassador, would you say that given the current situation and the fact that it's just not sustainable, that the current relationship between the state and public employees, that it's time to renegotiate that and look at that, particularly for new employees,
I wouldn't say that. I think the state must own up to its side of the bargain. I chaired the original commission
Let's
of this.
clarify. I'm sorry, clarify that. You mean put
the full amount of funding in. The amount the governor talked about is a step in the right direction. He mentioned dedicating lottery proceeds to the pension funds. I haven't studied it yet to know whether or not that makes sense, but I'm open-minded to that. We have to be creative. I think we throw money hand over fist to Wall Street, to hedge funds to manage our pension assets, and they give us back very mediocre, if not losing returns. There's a lot of money there. So we're going to have to look to a lot of different places to find the money that we need to find, but the state must own up to its end of the bargain.
Shift gears. Let's talk about school funding. This issue, we're not sure where it's going to play out. As the governor delivered his budget address, he said that, in fact, 100 days, the legislative leadership, and he will get together and talk about this. The school funding formula. There are many, many communities that are underfunded, that are not getting the dollars that they need outside of the urban communities, the so-called Abbott districts. What would you say to those communities right now who are just not getting the funding they need, and therefore their property taxes are way too high and not affordable for those citizens?
I'd say two things. Thank God the governor abandoned his so-called fairness formula, which is the ultimate us versus them proposal. So that's good news. The bad news is we have a school funding formula. It was blessed by our state Supreme Court. It's the only formula ever been blessed. It was a national model. I want to go back and fund that formula. This governor has underfunded it by over $8 billion. It'll be over $9 billion by the time he leaves. Let's fund the formula. And if we funded that formula, again, which was viewed to be one of the most innovative formulas in the country, if we fund that formula and we get our priorities straight again, I think we find our way clear to answering the question you've asked.
So you're convinced that the funding formula as it exists makes sense? Well, that it's a good plan.
It's a good plan. It needs to be updated. It was blessed in 2008, and it's never been funded. It asks the question, what I like about it, and what so many educators like about it, more importantly than what I think, is it's a bottoms-up formula. It doesn't just say District X will get Y dollars. It asks questions of, does this child have one, two, or no parents? Is English his or her first or not a spoken language? Do they have free or reduced lunch as a measure of poverty? Do they have special needs? Questions like that, and you build from the bottom up to an intelligent result. I like that a lot.
Ambassador, let me ask you this. By the way, I want to clarify, when I refer to you as ambassador, everyone may not know that you serve to the as ambassador of?
Ambassador to the United States of America to the Federal Republic of Germany under Barack Obama.
We will talk a little bit about some of your interesting comments that you've made about that experience and your reference to the current President of the United States. Fascinating. We'll get to that in a minute.
You bet.
But the dollars, whether you're talking about the pension situation in terms of state dollars to go into the pension fund or state dollars for public schools, the state contribution, school funding. Where would those dollars come from? And are you prepared to say, at this point in time, as we enter the spring of 2017, you know what? We should consider raising taxes on certain people in the state.
Yeah, I think everything's got to be on the table, literally everything. But again, I'd go back to the pension funds. One, I don't want to miss this point. We're throwing hundreds of millions of dollars at hedge funds and private equity funds.
Explain to folks.
Well, these funds, when they first started 30, 40 years ago, were exotic. They were unique. They had their own space, and they charged an arm and a leg. Typically 2% of the money you give me plus 20% of how much I earn. Those are big dollars. In the old days, you got what you paid for. In today's world, you don't. That's hundreds of millions of dollars that we're paying in fees and getting mediocre to poor returns. I wouldn't want to miss that. But I think we've got to turn over every stone, every spending item, every tax potential, big and small. I also think we have to get our priorities straight, honestly. It's a $35 billion budget. It's got a lot of zeros. The book is thick. Your eyes gloss over, but it screams out your priorities. Underfunding the school budget tells me that we're not caring about our kids. Giving out $7 to $8 billion in tax incentives to big corporations tells us the priorities of this administration. We got to look long and hard at that.
I just want to be clear before we leave this. You are open to the idea of raising taxes on the New Jerseyans who are at the higher end of the income bracket.
You have to be.
You have to be?
Absolutely. This is a state in economic crisis. Everything has to be on the table.
Respectfully, Ambassador, what about those who are in the Business and Industry Association and Chamber of Commerce and others who argue, wait a minute, what about if we lose those folks because they say, you know what, it's too expensive to be here. I'm leaving. I'm going to Florida, wherever.
And we've lost some of them. First of all, I want to be the governor if I get there for those who fought and stayed. Secondly, we have to grow our economy. The big gorilla issue under the Christie administration is a broken economy, one that is neither growing nor fair. And so for the folks who are frustrated and feel like they get painted into a corner, who could blame them? The fact of the matter is we got to grow this state again. We used to be really good at that. We were Silicon Valley before there was a Silicon Valley. We owned the infrastructure economy. We've lost our edge in both. Let's get that back. I believe we can get it back, and I want to do that.
Word association. I say President Trump, you say?
I'm hugely disappointed. I'm very concerned.
But it's worse than that, because, Ambassador, you actually said, and I could get this wrong, you made some reference.
You bet.
He said, you understand a little bit. He said, not an expert on Germany, but you know more than the rest of us. You know a heck of a lot more than me.
Yeah.
He said, I know a little bit about the history of Germany. And as I listen to this president, I hear things, I hear rhetoric, and I have a sense that reminds me of a time in Germany where some scary things happened in the 1930s, if I'm not mistaken.
20s and 30s.
20s and 30s.
I won't back off of that. I'm not trying to get people's hair on fire, but
well, it did.
We have to be on the edge of our seat. The comparison, at least in the early stages, and as I've also said, please God, I'm not suggesting it ends like it ended in Germany. But one thing you realize when you start discriminating against people based on whatever you want to fill in the blank, in this case, religious, based on how they worship their religion, and a Muslim ban in this case. When that train gets going down the tracks, the one lesson I know from Germany is it can get out ahead of you and you can never catch that train. So it's up to us to stand our ground. And an attack on one religion is an attack on all religions in this country, as an example.
Stay on the Trump administration, but it's connection back to New Jersey. Repeal and replace. We don't know where things are going to play out. State of Affairs will continue to monitor that, as well as our other colleagues in public television. What is your greatest concern about what the Congress and the president may or may not do as it relates to the Affordable Care Act and its impact on New Jerseyans?
Yeah, they talk about repeal and replace. As far as I can tell, it's a bumper sticker. It's not a policy. They can't themselves figure it out. If it were to be disassembled, the Affordable Care Act, it would be a fiscal and health care disaster for our state. And I hope our governor stands up, as many other governors have stood up and said, listen, Mr. President, Republicans in Congress, this is a potential American disaster. Look at the hundreds of thousands of people in our state who didn't have health care before, who have it now. Look at the millions who have pre-existing conditions who would no longer be able to get health care. Look at the tens of thousands of kids who are on their parents' plans till they're 26 years old. Women's access to
Medicaid expansion. Medicaid expansion as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. So they're now talking about Medicaid block grants. Here, you take this block of money, you figure out how to spend it.
What's wrong with that? What's wrong with the federal government saying, states, you take this money and you administer it?
There's a lot wrong with it. They did it with welfare in the 1990s.
What happened?
And you betcha we're dragging and people are going without. The first thing that would happen is folks who need Medicaid the most wouldn't get it. You start to make decisions. Health care goes from being a right to being a privilege.
You worry about those people?
I worry about them a lot, man. I worry about them a lot. This is an incredibly unfair state, and right now I fear that it's an unfair country under this president.
Ambassador, last question. I ask a lot of leaders in this position, the number one leadership lesson that you have learned and how it could help inform the kind of governor you'd be. I know it's a trick question. Number one lesson in leadership we've learned, how it would impact you as governor. Go.
If you have a crisis, get out ahead of it. I had a series of crises that I had to deal with as the U.S. ambassador in Germany. If you allow a crisis to drag you along, it invariably gets bigger and worse. You get behind it, you have fewer options. As painful as it is, get out ahead of it. So as an example, in this state, we have an economic crisis. Let's be frank with each other. Let's talk clearly about it. Let's have everyone understand where we are and where we could go.
Ambassador Phil Murphy, I want to thank you for joining us on
Honored to be here,
the
Steve.
premier edition of State of Affairs. And I also want to say to folks who are following us on Twitter and on Facebook that many of your questions that you've been submitting to us, you can see us online right there. We're continuing the conversation. So many of those questions have informed this interview with Ambassador Murphy, as well as the other interviews that we'll also be having with other candidates for governor. Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you, sir.
Stay with us. State of Affairs. We'll be right back right after this.
To see more State of Affairs with Steve Adubato programs, visit us online at stateofaffairsnj.org. If you would like to express an opinion, email us at info@caucusnj.org. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Steve Adubato, PhD. And follow us on Twitter at Steve Adubato.
State of Affairs is pleased to welcome New Jersey's first Lieutenant Governor, the 33rd Secretary of State, elected in 2013, but first time 2010.
I was going to say.
Don't worry, I'll get it right. I've interviewed you too many times. That's why we're too familiar.
But not in this context.
Everybody knows who you are. Kim Guadagno's in the house.
There you go.
State of Affairs. How do you like this?
This is beautiful.
Nice,
This
right?
is beautiful.
And
very,
JTV?
very nice. Absolute and convenient.
Right? It's beautiful. You're running for governor.
I am.
Because?
I am running for governor because I think I can do better. I think we need lower taxes. We need to make New Jersey affordable again, and we need to fight for the middle class. And that's me. I'm a working mom. I'm a military mom. I'm a person who's worked in this administration for 8 years and talked to thousands of people over those 8 years, and I know they can't make ends meet, and I think I can help them do that.
Let's get down into some issues that you and I have not talked about before. One of the things we talk about a lot is business. We'll get to that in just a little bit. This pension crisis that you think about a lot, you've been part of this administration for a long time. The governor's made, as part of this, $35 billion?
$35 billion and change.
Okay, so there's a $2.5 billion.
Big change, millions in change.
Yeah, not small change.
Yeah.
So the governor has proposed a $2.5 billion commitment to pay into this pension fund. That's a big number by anyone's standards. However, this hole in the pension crisis for public employees is huge.
Right.
What would you do right now to close that gap so that New Jersey's fiscal underpinnings would be a lot stronger than it is, and that pension fund is better than it is right now? Because it's horrible.
Well, you know what it is. It's insolvent. So we all know it's insolvent, not because of a Republican problem, not because of a Democrat, or you could say it's because of all of our fault.
Yep.
But it was in that shape when we came in. This administration has made the largest number of payments to the pension. I think it's double whatever the last 5 governors have done. But it's still insolvent, so we need to fix it. So you're right. I'll tell you what I did when I was in the sheriff's office. I'll give you the same conversation to you.
In your previous job?
In my previous job, I was the sheriff. I had 8 labor unions. And the big issue was the pension payment. And the answer I gave to them is, don't believe me, I'm management. Don't believe your labor leaders because they have other interests. Go back to your own accountant and ask your accountant if that pension is going to be there when you retire. And if the answer to the question is no, then let's come back and let's talk about how we fix it. And let's fix it in a way that's acceptable to you, the public pensioner, who's going to have to live with it. So that's the way I would attack it at a 30,000-foot level. I know in Trenton right now they're talking about putting the lottery in it and increasing the value, the asset value from 49% to 65%. I hope they can do that. There's a lot of complicated constitutional issues.
You would agree with the governor on that? The governor says, let's take the lottery funds, put it into that?
I think I think it's a good start.
It's a good start.
It's a good start.
We need to go much further than that. Do you believe that public employees, either those who are in the system right now or those who are coming into the system, that the state should renegotiate those contracts as it relates to health care benefits as well as retirement benefits?
Well, I don't think there's an alternative. This is what's happening right now.
There's no alternative? Phil Murphy sat here and said, absolutely off the table. Can't do it. State has to find other revenues. It has to be off the table for now.
He said that this year when he's running for office. When he's
sitting right there.
When he's in the pocket of every special interest group in New Jersey.
What does that mean, in the pocket?
NJEA endorsed him. PBA endorsed him. Name me a special interest that hasn't endorsed him, except for the Chamber of Commerce. So
respectfully, Lieutenant Governor, that doesn't mean being in the pocket to get their endorsement.
Let me answer the first question.
Go ahead.
Let me answer the first question, which is the pension issue, right? If you're being told, if he tells you he can make a full pension payment, which is $5 billion this year, plus or minus some millions.
A lot of money.
A lot of millions. And a $10 billion health care payment this year, that's $15 billion. Out
of a $35 billion budget.
We started with that $35 billion baseline. Just answer one question. Which schools are you going to close? Because you will have to in order to pay for the pension. Or which, and you still won't have enough money, and which hospitals are you going to close because you're going to have to pay for the pension? It's a toss-up. This is the conversation. This is why I say, when I met with my sheriffs, don't believe management, don't believe labor. Go back to your own accountant. If the money's not going to be there when you retire, which is the path we're on now, then let's come back and figure out how to protect the public sector unions who believed they were getting a pension when they signed on. Because you know what's happening? I'm interrupting you again. You know what's happening is, right now, we're hiring teachers and telling them there's going to be a pension. We know it's a lie.
Let me ask you something. Whether you got the endorsement of the teachers union or any other public employee union, would you tell them exactly what you're telling them right now?
I have. I screened with the NJEA. I told them exactly the same thing.
Whether you thought you were going to get the endorsement or not, you said the same thing.
I want to sit down and talk to them.
By the way, NJEA is a big supporter of public broadcasting, to fully disclose. You just went and said what you just said.
Absolutely.
Was it a good conversation back and forth?
It was a healthy conversation back and forth. Yeah, sure. Because that's the major problem right now. People need to accept that it's insolvent. They need to accept that we need to fix it.
Insolvent, so everyone understands
that the money's not going to be there when you retire.
Just not going to be there.
Not going to be there. Now, I said 12 years. The Byrne Commission, Healy Commission said 12 years.
You're
that was
talking
2 years
about
ago.
Tom Byrne, Democrat, who headed up the commission.
The bipartisan commission to talk about how we fix this thing. They said 12 years, so that was 2 years ago, so 10 years left. The NJEA, when I was there, was talking like 20. I said, okay, I'll take the middle.
Wow.
Still, the pension's not going to be there. And you're hiring teachers and police officers and career firemen right now, promising them a pension that we know will not be there. And that, to me, is offensive. That should offend everyone. So let's sit down and talk about it. Let's look at the lottery. Let's see if we can't fully fund it. And you know what could happen. The governor's funded, what, I think 2.5. Tom Byrne came out last week and said if we just made some adjustments in the health care, and I'm sure it's more than just some, because it would close the gap, and you could put another 2.2
I want to get to some other issues.
2.2 in. That's $5 billion. That's a full pension payment.
Right.
But they're going to have to negotiate on the back end, the health care side.
Are you going to let me get another question?
No, it's my interview.
Here we go.
We wanted to talk policy.
That's what happens.
There you
You got to
go.
get into the weeds a little
Yeah.
bit. All right, how about this? The school funding situation.
Yeah.
Many communities across the state are saying, you know what? We're getting shortchanged.
Right.
Our property taxes are going through the roof.
Right.
What would you do other than just saying get those communities more money? Because where's that money coming from?
Day one, what I would do.
If you were governor.
There's something, when I become governor, day one, there's something called adjustment aid. There's $560 million, separate from the school funding formula, that we give out to 180 districts in the state of New Jersey every year. $560 million. In two of those districts, Hoboken and Jersey City, we all know they're overfunded. Even they admit.
You mean they get more state aid than they should?
They get more state aid than they should. I would zero out that money right now.
I mean, give them nothing?
No. The adjustment aid.
particular rate, I'm sorry. Okay.
Adjustment aid. Day one. This is a long-term fix.
Got
but
it.
Day one, I would take that adjustment aid and right-size it. All of the overfunded groups in that pocket, I would take that money and put it in the underfunded. And we all know where the underfunded is. Talk to anybody. So the problem we have in New Jersey is the following. It's pretty simple. You got kids going to school up in Phillipsburg in trailers for 30 years. And they're an Abbott district, or a formerly Abbott district. 30 years,
They're not
these
rich.
kids, well, forget being rich, they're kids. They're learning algebra.
Right.
For 30 years, they're going into classrooms in trailers, while exactly at the same time, in another town in Monmouth County, you got AstroTurf on a football field, and you have state-of-the-art aquatic center. That tells you everything you need to know.
There's no equality.
Well,
there's no equity.
It's you need to right-size it.
All right, let's try this. Getting the economy of the state back on track, you say?
It's on track.
Improving our economy.
No, it's on track. We started at 9.8%.
In terms of unemployment.
Unemployment. We're now at 4.4%, which is 4 points, depending on what day it is, below the national average. And we have more people working in New Jersey today than the national average. How much more on track do you want to get?
You don't like the idea of renovating the State House, do you?
I hate the idea of renovating the State House.
But the governor says we need to do that, and a lot of people go down to the State House, go, look at this place.
Well, I don't have to always agree with everything the governor says.
I didn't say you did, but on this particular issue, people look at it and they go, you know what? This is not commensurate with the state of New Jersey and what we should have.
I understand that completely, and so let's fix what we have to fix. But it's like you. Do you fix your home if you don't have the money to fix it?
You don't think it's a high enough priority?
It's not a priority. It's a mixed-up priority, and I'll tell you why. Because that State House is going to cost $300 million to renovate. I'm not quite sure where they're getting the numbers, and I'm not quite sure where they're getting the money to pay for that. But set all that aside, we have the highest foreclosure rate in the country. We have 1 million people going to bed at night, every night in New Jersey, not knowing where their next meal is coming from. Is renovating the State House the first item on your agenda?
Would it be yours?
Renovating the State House? No,
Top
stop
5,
right away.
top 10?
No.
Couple more. What would you say, the Trump administration on health care?
Yes.
They passed on this. They did not pass the repeal and replace.
Right.
You know they're going to try it again. Are
Right.
they on the right track doing that?
Well, let me tell you a conversation I had with a congressman who will go nameless,
A Republican or Democrat?
a Republican, who...
In the delegation?
Yeah, in New Jersey,
Go ahead.
who the conversation I had with him as he was on his way to the inauguration. I said, so what are you going to do on day one with Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act?
Minute and a half left. Go
He
ahead.
said, we're going to defund it. I said, great. Let me tell you what happens next. In New Jersey, 530,000 people are suddenly without health care. And because we cut charity care in response to the expanded Affordable Care Act, the hospitals will fall in on themselves because everybody will now go to the hospitals. There's no charity care for those hospitals, and we will lose insurance for 530,000 people in New Jersey. Totally unacceptable. Find another plan.
The president's on the wrong track on this, isn't he?
On that one, I don't think it's on any track right now, as far as I can see.
If they get back on.
Well, what they have to do is fix the either change it all up, repeal and replace, and take care of those 530,000.
You didn't vote for Donald Trump, did you?
I did not vote for Donald Trump.
Not a fan?
I campaigned for Donald Trump because there's two people here, right? I'm the leader of my party as a Republican, and I'm a woman who...
Last question.
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. The woman who...
Who believed that he had crossed the line on some of the things.
Got it. Number one leadership lesson you have learned in your life that you would bring into the governorship. 30 seconds left.
The number one leadership is to close the loop. I've read that somewhere before. Right? I do my homework.
Close the loop? Are you trying to say you're quoting from my book, Lessons in Leadership?
I think I am.
Are you trying to...
Yeah.
It's working. So, listen, Lieutenant Governor, we appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
Wish you and all the candidates running for governor the best.
Thank you.
On State of Affairs.
We'll see you again?
Thank you. Okay. Yes, thank
Good.
you. See you next time on State of Affairs.
State of Affairs with Steve Adubato is a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating over 25 years of broadcast excellence. State of Affairs with Steve Adubato is brought to you from the Agnes Veris NJTV studio at 2 Gateway. Funding has been provided by RWJ Barnabas Health, the New Jersey Education Association, New Jersey Resources, the law firm of Gibbons PC, Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, NJM, International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 825, the Northeast Regional Council of Carpenters, and by these public-spirited organizations, individuals, and associations committed to informing New Jersey citizens about the important issues facing the Garden State, and by Employers Association of New Jersey.
My husband and I spent more than 30 years in the public schools. We're retired, but we like to stay involved.
You think he's going to learn to fly?
We're just as busy now as in our teaching days. The same goes for a lot of the retired educators we know.
Let me see you all flap your wings like you're penguins learning to fly.
Teaching is all about building relationships, and that never goes away. Because once a teacher, always a teacher. We're Ed and Miriam, and we are proud to be New Jersey educators.